Orleans had ever seen. It was an enormous undertaking, and a veritable army of artisans were seen marching into the swamplands to work the land. The sounds of hammering and sawing could be heard late into the night. The location, the captain had said, was chosen because of his love of the water. But there were many who believed it had more to do with the captain's desire to keep his comings and goings known only to the night creatures of the swamp. When the daughter was invited, along with her father, to see the beginnings of the glorious mansion, she was spellbound. Only a portion of the first floor had been completed, and yet she could already see that this was going to be an estate unlike any other. And more than the promise of the grand house itself, her heart leapt to think that she would soon be sharing it with this fascinating man, in what seemed to her a lush green fairy tale kingdom of their own making. To the nobleman, it was just a swamp, and it made him shudder to think of his daughter living here in the wilds outside the city. Oh, but the house, the foundations and the columns alone were grander than anything he could have ever imagined. This captain was a man of enormous wealth. That much was now clear beyond a doubt. The nobleman was a product of the old world and its notions of class and lineage. But this was not the old world, but the new. This was the land, after all, where money was fast becoming the only mark of nobility, and the nobleman's own fortunes were in fact starting to diminish. And so, the nobleman agreed to give the captain his daughter's hand in marriage. Pulling the daughter aside, the captain embraced her and offered her the most opulent wedding her heart desired. He would request the finest gown from Paris, the best musicians, the finest food anyone in America had ever tasted, anything she could possibly desire. But there was just one request. She must excuse his absence for the next several weeks while he made an important voyage out to sea. She, of course, agreed, happier than she had ever been in her life. "My voyage may be prolonged," he said. "Will you wait for me?" She replied, "As long as my heart beats. That's how long I shall wait for you. I will wait for you until the last beat of my heart. I'll have my second ring the ship's great bell and light a lantern atop the highest sail. That is how you'll know that I am but an hour away. When you see me, light up a candle so that I may imagine your lovely face and leave it burning to help light my return to you." The bride-to-be smiled her consent. The construction of the house continued during the captain's long absence, and as it had before, the work continued long into the night. From his veranda, the nobleman could hear the sounds of hammering from deep in the bayou, and his mind began to work as well. He simply couldn't offer his daughter's hand to this man. After all, it had been promised to another, and nothing in the world could change that. The fact that this other family also had enormous wealth certainly made it easier for him now to suddenly stand on principle. Thus, when the captain returned, he found a letter waiting for him. It was from the nobleman, who hadn't wanted to face the unnerving gaze of the captain in person, and it stated that the marriage was now an impossibility. Patient but resolute, the captain called on the nobleman one more time. "The mansion is finished," the captain said, "and if you will but come and view it, you will see that, as promised, it is the finest in all the land. I intend to hold you to your promise." Before the nobleman could find the words to respond, the captain called to his carriage, and a great chest was brought forth. It was opened at the nobleman's feet, and inside were such treasures as the nobleman had never dreamed of, jewels and heirlooms from faraway lands. The captain continued, "And for your keeping your promise, please accept this, one more gift to your family as a gesture of my faith and goodwill." The nobleman was dumbfounded and could only nod. The captain said, "So, will you keep your word and give me her hand?" The nobleman nodded again. As he prepared to depart, the captain said, "I will make one more voyage to sea, and I don't make it lightly, for your daughter's heart calls to me as no sea siren ever could. But make this voyage I must. When I return, we will have a wedding beyond anything you could imagine." The daughter, who had secretly been eavesdropping from the upstairs veranda, was overjoyed and immediately began making plans for the fateful day. As his daughter busily prepared for her nuptials, her father fretted over what to do. Surely he wasn't going to actually let his daughter marry this man. Finally, when several weeks had passed, he had made up his mind. The daughter had received a letter from the captain, off in some foreign port. He was returning soon. As one last gift, he had built a turret just above the mansion's attic, overlooking the sea, where she could await in private the ship's signal, as he had promised her. Ending the letter, he asked if she was prepared for the wedding, and if he might look forward to a candlelit glow beckoning him from her turret above the attic. She smiled to herself. Yes. Even better, her wedding dress had just arrived that same day from Paris, and she was having it fitted at that very moment. The nobleman stood out in the hall for a while, steeling himself. Then he knocked on his daughter's door. Upon entering, there she was, in her wedding dress, looking like an angel. He wept to see his daughter so beautiful, but he pretended his tears were for the news he was about to tell her. The sea captain was dead, drowned at sea. In a heartbeat, the bride-to-be's world was shattered. Sobbing, she ran from the house. In sorrow and despair, she ran across the town and into the swamps. Her immaculate French wedding dress dragged in the green weeds behind her as she made her way to the lonely mansion. It no longer looked inviting nor welcoming. Instead, it now had a foreboding ambience. No matter. She pushed through the massive front doors, and once inside, ascended to the attic and to the turret window where she had vowed to watch for her sea captain's return. Her father, having searched for her throughout the town, eventually made his way through the swamps to the mansion, with a squad of police in tow. "Look there!" exclaimed one of the men. "The light! There's a light in the window!" And so there was, one bright, white light. It wavered, as if held aloft by an unseen hand. A chill ran through the group of men, and the silence was shattered only by the scream of a raven. The group of men hurried to the large veranda, but when they reached the front doors, they had to force entry, as the clever girl had bolted every door behind her to keep everyone out. Eventually, they reached the door to the attic and called her name. Alas, there was no response. And more mysterious, even the stoutest policeman could not break down the door. After yelling themselves hoarse, they left, believing the desolate girl must in fact have fled elsewhere. One young policeman lagging behind did notice something rather odd. While the attic door was clearly locked, the strongest of them had failed to breach the latch, yet there were no signs of an actual lock on the door. However that attic was sealed, it was not by any lock he'd ever known. And so, it was some time later that the sea captain arrived in port. He was, however, surprised, and not a little displeased to discover there was no one there to greet him. The nobleman, whether in shame over the lie he had told, or in fear of the sea captain's wrath, had left town entirely. Perhaps he'd fled, on the excuse of searching for his beloved daughter. If, as some believe, the nobleman had sent nefarious men to do away with the sea captain, and so bring truth to his own black lie, those men had either been defeated or never materialized. No matter. The captain's demise would come soon enough. Sensing immediately that something was wrong, the captain raced to his mansion out on the bayou. His heart pounding with every step, he raced up the stairs to the attic. He tried the door, and though it held fast before the hardest blows from the policeman, it now swung open with his fearful touch. But inside the attic, and in the turret above, there was no sign of his waiting bride. There was no body to be found, only a torn, forlorn wedding dress draped beside a burnt-out candle. He did not need to be told. He knew in his heart that his young bride was dead. In a maniacal, grief-stricken rage, the captain ordered the mansion shuttered and closed, sealing himself inside. A full new moon waxed and waned.